Rain World. Oh, Rain World. I love this game and I hate this game. Passionately on both ends, actually. I followed it from Kickstarter all the way to release, going back and checking for a release date every so often. It was exciting, and it's been met with some mixed response from a lot of people. There's a reason for that, actually. Before the main critique, though, let's talk about what the game is, for anybody wondering. Skip to that there timecode on the screen if you already know Rain World and you just want the critique. Oh. And spoilers, obviously. If you intend on playing Rain World, I don't recommend watching this video. I'm gonna spoil everything. Everything! Rain World is a survival platformer in which you play as a slug cat in a post-apocalyptic world ravaged by pollution. Creatures and beasties of many varieties exist in this world, some very warped by forces you don't understand at first. Some will hunt you and eat you, some are friendly, and sometimes the line between the two is rather thin. Lurking in the background is the ever-present rain that the game gets its name from.
Oh shit, the rain?
And once the rain falls, you best hope you're inside a shelter, or you can die. A lot. I mean a lot. I mean a lot. By various means, really. So yeah, Rain World is a difficult game. It was especially difficult on release. Version 1.0 was pretty hellish. Devs have released versions 1.1 and 1.5 so far. I'll be focusing on the state of the game as of 1.5. I will also not be focusing on the hard mode, Hunter, in this video, as that's a whole other can of worms unto itself. Rain World's difficulty comes from a lot of places. The creatures that want to kill you, and the entire game being one big time trial will put a lot of people off. Also, there's seemingly a lot of Dark Souls influence creeping about. I know at least one of the developers played a crap ton of the series. Some of this difficulty is warranted and acceptable, and some of it, in my opinion, isn't. First off, the controls of Slug Cat. The controls are fine. Some people are gonna hate what I just said there. You'll find there's a lot of people here and there that despise the controls and say the game controls like garbage. They're actually half right, I think. The problem isn't the controls. Once you've mastered the controls, and there is a sizable learning curve, mind you, you'll be able to do anything you want in the world and survive most encounters just fine. Controls are actually extremely unique. This ain't no Mario clone. It controls so much differently than any other platformer that I've ever played. That's worth praising on its own, honestly. Just because controls are different doesn't make them bad, unless you want to stifle anything new that comes along, which really isn't a great idea. The issue is you aren't taught many of the controls. Yeah, it's kind of a bad decision, IMO. Here's everything you're taught in the game's short and sweet tutorial, and on the right side here's every control that actually exists in the game. Now there is a tutorial list that actually teaches you a lot of things past the in-game tutorial, but it's not going to tell you how to control your character. Its tutorial sense is more about showing you where to go, or what you can eat and what is a threat in the world. This actually inspired me to make this infographic for newcomers to the game, and as well on the Rain World Wiki there's a very nice in-depth look at every control in the game with gifs to match. Very nicely laid out, actually. Let me level with you here though. I despise what I call wiki games. Games where you feel you need to look up information in order to understand the game you're playing instead of just playing the game. This is actually a problem all throughout the game, actually. You are not taught fundamental things that matter. You are not armed with information against those that oppose you. The developers have a reason for doing this, granted. They want you to figure out a lot of things yourself. I actually love myself a good old textless tutorial. But the issue is that the textless tutorials where you figure out the buttons and actions need to be incredibly well crafted. Rain Worlds aren't. Let's go over a few examples. Swimming. Swimming in the game doesn't make sense without being told what's happening. Basically, Slug Cat can swim faster by pressing the jump button. However, what the game doesn't tell you and doesn't make obvious is that this boost also uses up your air supply quicker than if you didn't hit the boost at all. And you might be saying to yourself, well, if somebody dies, then they'll know what they did wrong. Not so. A player's instinct will probably be to hit that jump button immediately on water and be gratified when they see the speed boost and then confused when they die quickly. But they might not have that comparison beforehand of knowing what their air supply is supposed to be like. One way this could be done in a textless tutorial way is to have bubbles come out of Slug Cat when a boost is done. This would insinuate the effect, although not make sense realistically perhaps. But Bubble Root also doesn't make sense. Games have their own meta after all. Or just do away with the mechanic entirely and just make speed boosting water have a cooldown but not use up air. This makes a lot of sense and doesn't need to be explained to be understood. It just feels simpler and more solid as a mechanic. Interestingly, I actually think the devs might not have thought about how to do some textless tutorials they could have done. In Shoreline, you have a straight-up text tutorial telling you that if you throw food into the water, shrimp are attracted to it that you can then use to your advantage. However, I came up with an idea of how to do this textless and also reinforce another element of the game. What the devs could have done is to set up the fruit in the center of the room hanging down, but out of Slugcat's reach. 2 pipes go up the side of the room, but they're either far enough away to keep Slugcat from reaching the fruit or low enough. The player will have learned about fruit and food by now and want it, but not be able to reach it. They'll probably have used spheres by now. Maybe we can permanently place one in this room. From here, they might figure out that you can throw a sphere at the food and make it fall. It'll probably fall into the water and a shrimp will come along. This enforces the food to shrimp bait tutorial, but also teaches the player they can hit food to make it drop. All of this done in a textless way. Now, what you have to keep in mind through all my complaints about the tutorial system in the game is that there is design intent here. Obviously. The team did think about all of this when it was being made. The design intent is to make a world that is not made for the player. Think about it for a second. Think about how unnatural video game worlds are for a second and just how designed they are for the player's convenience. Every tightrope for Mario, every spring pad for Sonic. It doesn't make sense lore-wise. It doesn't make sense why everything works in the player's favor normally. It doesn't make sense why the villain designs their facility for the player to be able to traverse it. For Rain World, it does make sense, at least halfway. The torrential rain is a character named Five Pebbles literally water cooling his facility. The pipes that are your main way of traversing are part of civilization long since lost. The animals exist not for your sake, but surviving on their own, and they want to eat you because they're carnivores, not because they hate Slugcat emotionally. Well, unless you piss off scavengers by killing their kind. Then they'll put out the old word to hunt your butt down. However, there are cracks in this intent, not just in how frustrating it is for the player, but in its own logic. Rabbit walkers exist, they roam the farm arrays, having evolved to stand tall above the living grass that exists in the biome. However, their food source doesn't make sense. It's hidden underground, away from their reach. Maybe this isn't their only source of food, but you're never shown anything else they can eat. They don't seem to be carnivores, and they don't eat any other plant that exists in farm arrays. I really hate the rabbit walkers, and a lot of that has to do with their food and figuring out what it does. Although they're also glitchy pieces of crap that sometimes don't want to do what they're told. This food is actually a key part to the entire farm arrays area and has many uses. That might be cool if you were told any of it. Figure it out, the devs wordlessly tell you. The issue is that before this very late part of the game, most items have one use. This food has many, and it doesn't look like food. So you pick it up and throw it and it creates a smoke cloud. Cool, you think, so I can use this for escapes maybe? You try it, it doesn't work. The smoke doesn't stop scavengers and creatures from being able to kill you. Which is great, by the way. The one part that I thought would be the part of this item isn't part of this item. If you throw it when you first see it, you might hear it cry, but nothing else happens. You need to be in a specific rabbit walker area in order to make this work. Fun fact, I'm actually lying to you. This is a rabbit walker area. This is where you can actually spawn them. Throwing the food this time actually didn't make one spawn. Which is just magical, you know? I mean, like, if it doesn't do anything the first time, then somebody has no reason to expect it to work a second time. The rabbit walkers aren't scripted. This is a huge, huge issue. Also, I'm probably going to blow some minds here. It can be thrown at these beehives to pacify the bees, and then you can actually wield that beehive and then throw it at other things as a sort of hand grenade, to then use the bees against that creature. And last but not least, it can actually be used against centipedes to just straight up kill them. Now I don't know about you, but it almost makes no sense whatsoever that one type of material is a pacifier, food, and poison, depending upon the animal that you're using it against. And I hope you realize through all of this that, again, you have to figure out all of this on your own. The game has taught you up until now that each item has one use. Firecracker plants explode, bubble plants give you air when underwater, etc, etc. You're very likely to find one of these uses for this rabbit walker food and then not discover the others. Because up until now, there's only been one use for every single item that you've encountered. It would really help if the discoverability if the food was actually next to where you needed to use it. There's these parts of land where you can't get over it because there's tall living grass. This living grass kills you and you can't get through it when it's this tall, so you need a rabbit walker who can actually walk over this tall grass and survive it. This is actually one of only 2 ways needed to traverse in order to actually finish the game. The food is actually nowhere near this. Like, the devs have specifically designed it so that you have to go on a journey, a trek, to actually get this food to these rabbit walker areas, and then use it to spawn a rabbit walker, and then they use yet another one to make them bend down. It's just too much to ask a player to understand, in my opinion. It doesn't look like food, it has a lot of uses. I just wish that it was easier to figure out. Or remove rabbit walkers entirely and redesign this area, which in my opinion might be sorely needed, because it just feels broken as far as a logic loop is concerned. And seriously, rabbit walkers have caused a lot of problems, even ignoring all of this. Like, here's one that actually managed to soft lock me. Like, if you look to the left, that's to living grass. And then the rabbit walker actually got on top of the hole that is the exit to this area and just stayed there, because I popped the food right above it. So I just was stuck here, and I just had to wait for the rain to come, because I didn't have any more food to get them away from the hole. All of this actually makes the rabbit walkers the least liked creature in the game, even though it can't kill you. Like, I don't have a poll on hand, but people have done polls in the Rain World community. The rabbit walkers are actually the least liked, just because of all of these issues and how glitchy in behavior these guys are. Now, obviously this review is focused a lot on the bad parts of Rain World first and foremost, and you might be thinking to yourself, man, this is a pretty bad game. But no, I've just viewed the criticism as more important than praising what the game did right. But let's talk about what it did do right for the fun of it for the moment. The combat in Rain World is absolutely amazing. You have one weapon, and mastering it and mastering fights with all the unique AI of Rain World is a progression loop that is incredibly fun and surprisingly in-depth, considering that one weapon. The AI of Rain World should be praised, and the way the game loads in is pretty genius. Adjacent rooms are still loaded and enemies can cross over from a different room, making it where you're never really safe outside of hibernation chambers. It should go without saying, but Rain World is a beautiful game. The art and the music are two extremely good and extremely hard to criticize areas of the game. My main beef lies in the overall tutorial nature of the game and in how some gameplay mechanics play out. Everything else is really rather wonderful. Vultures might just be my favorite non-boss enemy in any game ever. They're vicious, they're quick, they're imposing and brilliantly designed. In the background you get to see them before they actually show up most times, and that creates a ton of tension in a really short amount of time. And even though they can kill you in one bite and they're so fast, they don't feel cheap. Not to me at least. Your mileage may vary. It takes quite a few hits to kill one of these, and it feels amazing when you do. An epic battle to the death between David Slugcat and Goliath McGoliathface. And hey, they drop their mask and you get to scare other creatures as a power-up sort of thing. Cool. I can't help but feel the darkness in Shaded Citadel works against the player more so than it should, especially in combination with the spiders and the spider mechanics. So Shaded Citadel is what will usually be the third area in the game. It has areas of darkness where you can't see almost anything but yourself. There are ways around this darkness. You can eat one of Moon's neurons, which you won't do until later on if at all, to make yourself glow. You can bring a lantern mouse, which weighs you down and you can't bring it everywhere, but otherwise works. And you can trade with a scavenger or kill them for this glowing stone, which you probably won't figure out on your own because this is a wiki game, except the killing part, that makes enough sense on its own. Problem is the spiders in the area. They have a unique mechanic that I think a lot of people can miss because of the darkness. The more of them there are, the more dangerous they are. If you throw something at a stack of spiders, they'll separate and be manageable. With the darkness mechanic in place, this can be missed, I feel, especially in Survivor. It's extremely common for people to stumble through Shaded Citadel and then quit the game because they can't figure out this combination of things. Bring a light source, separate spiders, groups are dangerous. Either taking away the darkness or maybe making spiders themselves glow would make it more obvious what was going on, would make the separation mechanic easier to figure out. Also, glowing spiders would look pretty damn cool, probably. Taking away spiders completely would also work. Then you still have to contend with the darkness and figure out platforming in the dark or with a light source, but that feels more manageable. It's the combination that's problematic, not each element on its own. This is the biggest stopping point in this game, by the way. A really large amount of players got to Shaded Citadel, couldn't figure out the spiders, and then quit the game permanently. Because they felt that they couldn't overcome the spiders, they couldn't figure out the key as it is. Also, like, minor note here, but the flashlight for easy mode being weak and insubstantial just comes off as if the devs feel like making the game easy or accessible is unacceptable. Really, their easy mode doesn't go far enough in making the game accessible. Which they're aware of. They've stated they don't actually want it to be viewed as easy mode, but just another way of playing the game differently. But it could have been, and there would be a lot more fans of Rainworld if it was. This is just a mental roadblock a lot of developers have where there's one true experience and offering a peaceful or truly easy mode is unacceptable. That's part of a much larger conversation, but it's irksome to see here. I like challenging and hard games. I feel pretty at home in the medium mode, Survivor. But I always do like seeing peaceful and easy mode for others who don't like that kind of thing, but still like the world and atmosphere of a game and still want to experience it. Difficulty modes exist. You can have like an easy game, an easy mode for people who don't like the difficulty, and it'll just be just as valid, and they'll enjoy the game more so because you had that mode. Like I said, part of a much larger conversation though. The Rainworld devs have a habit of taking difficulty one step too far. In 1.0, you lost karma, but also mapped out on death. In Shaded Citadel, there's darkness, which is already hard to deal with from a platforming aspect, but also there's spiders. Hey, there's water in this game. Better get your swimming skills up to par so you don't drown. Also, there's leeches that swarm and kill you in the water in sometimes really unavoidable spots. In the hard mode, there's all kinds of new creatures to encounter that make the game harder. Also, you only have 20 cycles to live, so save sparingly. Hey, here's a zero-G environment that's pretty hard to navigate with electrifiers everywhere. Also, there's these floating spaghetti monsters to really get your blood hot. Lore in this game is annoying. It's annoying in a way I don't quite understand why somebody would think it was interesting. Lore in this game is handled by colored pearls. However, these pearls must be transported to Looks to the Moon, the only character in the game who will read them to you. This is neat the first time, but you have to understand these lore pearls are spread throughout the regions. There are some that are as far away as they can possibly be from Moon, entailing you to make a journey back every single time. And that journey will actually be pretty repetitive, as there aren't that many ways to actually make your way to Shoreline. As a reminder, you can only hold 3 items max, and holding items in your paws does slow you down slightly. I think anyway. And Shoreline, the place where Moon resides, is actually pretty far from a lot of other regions. Why isn't Moon in a more central location, like Industrial Complex? Oh, right. The world isn't designed for me. Great. The system made it to where I was completely uninterested in finding lore myself and just looked everything up on the wiki. I just take issue in general with games making the story hard to actually absorb. If it's easier to look up on a wiki than it is to actually find it in the game, then I think you've failed. At least in a couple respects. Before even speaking to Moon, you're going to have to go on a quest to find 5 Pebbles, another NPC in the game. He'll give you a gift, which will allow you to communicate with him as well as Moon. As a side note, the game actually directs you to Looks to the Moon before it directs you to 5 Pebbles. This means that you would also have subsequent quests afterwards, which actually aren't even, like, that obvious to begin with. But it's just doing the same thing over and over again and again, for a slightly different result. And that result only being at the end. Doing a repetitive task for a different result at the end just feels like garbage to me when games do it. Rainworld is a game that wants to be an art piece more than it does a game at times. It's actually a bit maddening because there is a fantastic, unbelievably good game that could have taken place here. The game looks amazing, it sounds amazing, the controls, once learned, are amazing. But level design and design philosophies in general keep it from reaching true greatness. I don't feel this design philosophy of don't design the world for the player resulted in a better game. Everything I love about Rainworld is not bound by this philosophy, and is indeed hampered by it. Tutorials that are obtuse and irritating go through are common in games. I'm definitely not saying that Rainworld needs to go full on Call of Duty on all of us, but they're on the opposite side of the spectrum of their tutorials being too obscure and hard to figure out. And also, if you go on anywhere talking about Rainworld, you're going to find a lot of people confused about where to go, what things to do. I hang around the Rainworld subreddit a lot, because I do like the game despite its flaws, and you would maybe be surprised just how many people are confused by the things in Rainworld. Why can a person go from Industrial Complex to Chimney Canopy when progress cannot be gotten this way? You can sequence break, but my god if sequence breaking is less important than generally guiding somebody where they would want to go. If the idea is to let people come back to Industrial Complex, there's simple Metroidvania tricks to allow a one-way passage. Rainworld is weird in its world design because you can go everywhere, but in order to follow the main story, you must follow a linear path in an open world. Why? Why isn't the game linear if the main path is linear? Or why couldn't there be multiple ways to end the game to make this open world make sense? Why aren't rabbit walkers scripted? There's no difference between scripting rabbit walkers to walk in a patrol and having them be spaghetti coated besides frustration. I would feel the exact amount of cool walking over living grass, just less mad. The developers could make the clock clearer and more easily understood on the map page. When Rainworld came out, a lot of game reviewers were confused at two core systems of the game, the Rainworld timer and the leveling system. The leveling system uses its own notation, not English numbers or even dots. I think just adding a ticking sound when the map is brought up would be an unannoying addition. The developers wanted to give Rainworld its own language, its own symbols, but if those symbols just translate into concepts that already exist in the world, why have them exist at all? Good for immersion, bad for player understanding is the trade-off. I feel the clock is important to change. I can understand wanting the leveling system to remain as is. Jonathan Blow talked about in Making Witness how it started off at first with players being able to cast spells by drawing symbols. But this can also be accomplished by a button. So by nature, you're adding on a layer of complexity that doesn't actually add onto the base mechanic and complement it. It just obscures the mechanic below that layer of obfuscation and makes it a harder mechanic to learn overall. I'd like to talk about how unnatural it was and is for me that you can befriend creatures in this game. Unlike with Undertale, the fact that you can befriend creatures wasn't a part of the advertising. And honestly, you're never going to figure out that you can befriend lizards without hearing about it first. The process of befriending a lizard is feeding it multiple times and not hitting it. However, there's no gameplay feedback for feeding a lizard. It will take the food away, and if you follow it, it will turn on you just as soon as it's done. You have no reason whatsoever to think that you can befriend these guys in the game itself. It actually takes multiple feedings depending upon the lizard to befriend it. Why would you do it more than once if there's no feedback for doing it in the first place? When creatures are killed, you're actually shown a symbol for the kill later on when you hibernate, at least for Hunter. I feel as if adding on a symbol to show a creature being friendlier towards you displayed next to them when you hibernate next would go a long way to making taming them make sense. Or a happy-ish tone playing when you feed it would work. Any kind of feedback. Games need feedback for mechanics to make sense. After I showed this part of the video to a friend, they actually came up with an even better idea that's more immersive. Instead of having a tone play or having a symbol show up, you can actually just have the lizard make a happy chirp or make some kind of positive sound themselves. And that would actually tell you that you're doing something as well. Let me quickfire off some changes to Rainworld I'd like to see. I'd like to see this toll spot at the entrance to farm arrays moved or removed. I think the idea behind it is to stop a novice player from going into farm arrays immediately, which I can respect, although IMO you shouldn't be able to go this way period because of this reason. But in hard mode especially, it can make it hard to get out of farm arrays and frustrating because there's no easy save beyond this toll spot, and if you die enough, you can get locked out of even being inside the outskirts and need to grind levels. That's kind of like the thing that has always annoyed me throughout Rainworld has been getting locked out of farm arrays or sky islands, because you can very easily die when going into these areas and be locked out of them. As long as I'm in an area when I drop down to level 1, I'm kind of okay with it. What the f- Oh my gosh. Personally, I like throwing a pearl into a gaggle of scavengers in a toll spot to actually work as payment. Right now, payment needs to be done in a very specific way, which is kind of cruddy since that very specific way isn't taught. Making Sky Islands traversable by at least one route normally would be nice. Right now, Sky Islands can't be traveled through unless you learn jump boosting or learn that you can grab a cicada to jump higher. Having these routes for advanced players would be cool if there also existed a route for people who didn't know that information. Why is the map like this? I don't understand. Like, just honestly, this is a 2D game. The map doesn't have to be multi-layered like this. It's just confusing. What it might be trying to mimic is how our memory works in layers, but just gameplay mechanic-wise, this feels obtuse for no real reason. There's maps on the Rainworld Wiki that are straightforward. Maybe there's a programming reason why this is done, like only one section of map can be loaded at a time, which if so fair, but if it's just deliberately like this, I'm kind of baffled. Looking at your map should not be hard or difficult. I'd love it if threat music ended after the thing that was causing the threat music was killed. Threat music is actually pretty cool. It boots up whenever there's a threat nearby. It even lets you know when you've pissed off scavengers and when they're at peace with you. But it doesn't end when you've killed a creature, only after you've left the screen where the fight occurred. Which is just strange and weird, honestly. It would be nice to have a region-by-region map or confirmation for all the collectibles in the game. You can unlock creatures and items and maps for use in an arena and sandbox, but there's no real way to know when you've cleared an area. It's actually even kind of annoying because certain unlockables can only be found in certain difficulties. These aren't really necessary, but for completionists and people who want to get the most out of these modes that they can, it would be nice to know when you've gotten everything in a region, and maybe even everything in a difficulty. So for the fast travel system that exists in the game, they actually took that away for the Hunter. Taking away a fast travel system is not adding on difficulty, it's adding on tedium more than anything else. This video has gone on long enough, and I think I've made my points clear enough through all of this. Though I didn't talk about everything I loved or hated about Rainworld, there's just too much to do in one video. I love Rainworld. It's a fantastic, perhaps 10 out of 10 game once you understand everything that's going on. Still rather hard probably, but still very fun. Very similarly to how I feel about Dark Souls. But that journey to understanding everything that is going on in this game, and Dark Souls, is not conveyed well to the player. The design philosophy of don't design the world for the player may be inherently flawed as far as the Rainworld developers have pulled off here. I can't help but feel that a game that doesn't have this philosophy but still has the combat, physics, AI, and look and sound of Rainworld would be amazing. Rainworld is available on GOG, Steam, and PS4 currently. Links in the description. Support the developers, maybe give the game a shot if you're willing to forgive these flaws I've stated or don't feel they're flaws at all. I do love this game, it's just that I hate all of what I perceive as flaws in the game. Maybe you disagree with that and you love the design philosophy Rainworld employs. That's totally fine and I can agree to disagree. Maybe you figured out everything I said was hard to figure out on your own. I just want you to consider that not everybody had that experience. I just really love for newcomers to the game to be able to enjoy the game as much as I do as a veteran of the game, and generally make the ride to veteranship smoother. This has been Borch, signing off. See you next video, everybody.